Let's talk about IRAC, not the country, the legal analysis. We're going to talk about issue, rule, analysis and application, and conclusion. As a way of introducing this concept of legal reasoning, I had my students write a paper answering the very important legal question, where should I eat lunch? It's something we decide every day, and I wanted them to treat that as this legal question they needed to answer. And then we're going to have some rules. So how close is it? How much time will it take? How good is the food? How healthy is the food? We have certain rules that we might not even think about when we're debating where should we eat. And then I wanted them to do some analysis to come up with a logical conclusion. And I even, as you see on the screen here, provided some 4 sample paragraphs that they could use to really point them in the right direction. And how were the papers? There were some good ones, especially considering that for many of you, this was your first experience with the IRAC format, this idea of legal reasoning. But for many of you, you felt that you needed to persuade me on why I should go to your restaurant. And so you gave me a really persuasive piece, a persuasive writing piece, trying to convince me that I should eat at your restaurant. But the way you persuade someone using legal reasoning is showing, hey, here are the rules, and I'm gonna logically apply the rules, and then I'm going to come up with a logical conclusion. Okay, some of you gave me what I like to call CRAC instead of IRAC. Okay, with IRAC being issue, rule, analysis, application, and conclusion, CRAC being conclusion, rule, maybe a little bit of analysis, and then a conclusion again. Some just gave me conclusion, 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 and some of it was amazing. Some of you should be poets. Some of you should write restaurant reviews. One went on to 3 pages where I'm hearing how amazing the experience is, the outdoor patio, how they treat you, how it's part of your hometown. Some of you suggested this is the type of restaurant that you would move into a city just because it's the type of city with that kind of restaurant. Others, a lot of you just said, hey, go across the street to Chick-fil-A because it's cheap and fast and pretty good and good service. So I got a number of different things like that. But I want to zoom in on some of my comments, and in particular, the one I did for Team Punter. So zooming in on Team Punter, what I want you to notice is that their entire essay was 131 words long. So again, some papers went on to 2 pages, one went on to a 3rd page, single space, trying to move me to tears on why I should eat at your restaurant. And here was one that was pretty good, that was only 131 words long. And to give you an idea how short 131 words is, I decided to make my review of their paper exactly 131 words long. So if you look at what I wrote right there, my review right there, 131 words. That's how short their pretty good IRAC was. I don't mean to suggest that shorter is always going to be better when it comes to writing. Not at all. There's going to be many situations where there is no way you can do justice to the legal analysis in just 131 words. But where shorter is often better when it comes to writing is in the length of your sentences. Notice in my comments here, I talk about a study that was done on sentence length. And they found that when a story had sentences that did not exceed 8 words per sentence, readers understood 100% of the story. When you increased the sentence length to an average of 14 words per sentence, then the readers only understood 90%. And notice when we go to 43-word sentences, comprehension dropped to below 10%. Now, some of you have really long sentences, and it just gets confusing, and also you're making it harder on yourself because, hey, where are you putting the commas? You have dashes, you have semicolons, you have parentheses. You're engaging in a very complex exercise when it could just be really short. And sometimes it can feel choppy to you, okay? A lot of times it depends on how you speak. We have some different cultural differences. But if our goal is clarity and to have our readers understand, studies show that shorter sentences are helpful. I want to give you something else that helped me as I developed my own understanding of the IRAC method of writing, because it's something I had to learn for law school and also on the different state bar exams that one has to take to become licensed in a given state. And it's a quotation from an old law professor that I had. And he said something like, hey, you know what, there's a fine line between effective IRAC essay writing and devolution into a Myna bird. I remember thinking, what the heck is he talking about? And you might be thinking the same, but let's think about it. You understand the idea of evolution, right? I just put a picture on the screen. You understand the theory and this idea that maybe there's development or progress. Well, devolution would be the opposite. So here we might have a picture of what, again, going from left to right, what devolution looks like, okay? It's opposite of the picture that we might have seen. But what is devolution into a Myna bird? Well, here's a Myna bird. What in the world are we talking about? Well, something that's kind of interesting about this is the Myna bird is famously one of the best birds at mimicking human speech. Okay, when you think of a parrot, think of an African gray parrot is great at mimicking human language, and the Myna bird is famously even better. So what does that mean? It means there's a fine line between doing effective IRAC method legal analysis papers for the bar exam or law school and just devolving into something that just parrots and doesn't know anything. Do you want an example? Okay. I think this is what the professor was saying, because sometimes we want to add so much. You want to add pages of all your thoughts and everything when sometimes it's simpler than we're making it out to be. So I'll give an example from contracts law. Okay, and just a year ago, I was taking the bar exam in New Mexico, so I had to go through the same process if they asked me a contracts question on the essay portion, which they might have. Don't remember now, and I'm not supposed to say even if I did. So let's say that you have a brand new car, a brand new amazing car. Let's say it's a Lamborghini and you drive to campus in your Lamborghini. Let's say that it's a $300,000 car. It's amazing. Okay, you got to get to campus somehow. You choose the Lamborghini. And let's say that you give one of your classmates a ride in the Lamborghini. Now, what's crazy about this new Lamborghini that I know nothing about, but let's say it has so many bells and whistles that when it comes to turning it off or on or opening the door and doing these things, that it's confusing and frustrating, and you actually feel like you got locked in your car and you're frustrated or it's not starting right. And in your frustration one time you say, I would get rid of this thing for $5,000 right now. And your classmate in the passenger seat turns to you and says, I accept. Do we have an enforceable contract right now between you and your classmate for selling your Lamborghini for $5,000? Now, in a month, when we cover contracts, you're going to have this down. You're going to know this. But let me go ahead and tell you what would go through my mind if this was a question I had to answer in IRAC format, orally or in some sort of essay format. My first question would be, okay, is there a contract? And so I need to know what kind of law are we talking about? Is this for the sale of goods or is this for services? And so I would talk about, hey, you know what, this looks like it might be for the sale of goods, so the UCC would be the controlling law. But now getting into the meat, we have a question of what is an enforceable contract? An enforceable contract contains an offer, acceptance, consideration, and an absence of defenses. That's just how I've memorized it. There's some different ways of memorizing it. But then it's like, okay, well, was there an effective offer? Well, an effective offer has an objectively expressed intention to be bound, communicated to an identifiable offeree, and inviting the offeree to accept the terms. Okay? I'm sounding like a Myna bird. This is my point. But then now I have to do some analysis on, was there an objectively expressed intention to be bound, communicated to an identifiable offeree? And this is where you'd make your money in the analysis. Here, or in this case, did you really objectively, so looking as a reasonable person looking in and not knowing your internal feelings, but would a reasonable person think you really intended to be bound to making this offer to sell this to your classmate for $5,000? Or were you just frustrated? Were you just flustered? So that's where you'd make your money. You do your analysis. You're no longer a Myna bird, but notice there was a fine line. Okay, some of those rules, it's just a little bit of regurgitation. So now at this point, you might say, hey, you know what? it sounds like you were just frustrated. You did not intend to be bound. Therefore, it cannot be an offer. Therefore, there was no offer to be accepted. Therefore, there cannot be offer acceptance or any consideration. Therefore, there's not an enforceable contract, and you get to keep your Lamborghini. Sorry, classmate, you didn't just buy it for $5,000. Do you understand the process of legal analysis? Do you understand the IRAC method? Okay, good luck. I want to spend a little more time on the A and the C. When doing the application analysis, I think it's helpful to force yourself to use the word because. Again, this is what I've had to do. The reason why you say because is because it's going to force you to do some of the analysis. So for example, when you're deciding where to eat, some of you might just say, eat at Chick-fil-A. Well, if you said because after that, it's going to force you to say because it's convenient, because it's cheaper, or something like that. So as you're arguing through these things, if you want to make sure that you're not just making a conclusion in your analysis, say because. It's going to force you to give an explanation. Also, when you have competing cases, so sometimes assignments are going to be more complicated than where should I eat lunch, right? You're going to be looking at different cases and having to apply the rules of those different cases. So sometimes you might need to say, unlike this other case, this situation, the facts in our situation are more like this case, or this is more like this. Unlike, or as we saw in, this is more like this, because. So some of these phrases, just using because or unlike this other case or more like this case, that can really help you to make sure that you're forcing yourself to do good analysis. Finally, there's the conclusion. This is actually the least important part of the IRAC essay. The difficult part usually is, can you identify the issues? Do you understand the rules? And can you apply these logically to a conclusion? There are two ways, though, that you can have a bad conclusion. One of them is by not having a conclusion. So for example, I've had some papers when I asked for this IRAC lunch assignment where the final response is, so you can eat wherever you want. Well, thanks a lot. I asked you where I should eat lunch, and you just said, go eat wherever you want. Someone went in through some constitutional analysis where it's a free country, and I'm free to go eat wherever I want. Again, thank you. That's wonderful news. But I had the issue of where should I eat lunch, and your answer wasn't helpful. It was no conclusion. And along those same lines on IRAC lunch, as an example, someone gave me a list of 3 choices to choose from. It was actually a pretty good paper, and you did narrow my choices from all the restaurants in the world down to these wonderful 3 choices. But again, you didn't get me across the finish line. So one of the ways to have a bad conclusion is not to have one. The other way is this. The other way to have a conclusion that really just doesn't work is to have one that just doesn't add up. So again, it's not a math class, but this whole idea is your conclusion should logically follow from the analysis and application of the rule that you have. So let's say you had a rule statement on where I should eat lunch that says, hey, it should be pretty good, pretty cheap, and pretty close. And you're going through the analysis, I'm reading it, I should be nodding my head going, this makes sense, you're applying the rules, this is great. And then you get to the conclusion and you say, therefore, I should get on a plane and fly to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico for the best fish tacos I can get anywhere in the world. It sounds delicious. I might love that. I might love the idea, but that does not logically follow from pretty good, pretty cheap, pretty close. That takes me a flight or a huge road trip for me to get to these fish tacos. It doesn't logically follow from the application of the rules. So 2 ways to have a bad conclusion is not giving a conclusion or providing one that really just doesn't add up. It doesn't logically follow.